so, and then we'll get started. Waiting for the clock to strike 11. Or I'm in 11 because I'm in Eastern Standard Time. Okay, I'm ready to go. How about you guys? Everyone listening, paying attention? You had your hot chocolate or coffee or tea? Ready to go? All right. Well, here we are. Hello, everyone. My name is Lindsay Hirt. Thank you for tuning in to my webinar. It's entitled Beached Marine Mammal Strandings on Cape Cod, Massachusetts. And I'm presenting to you today from the lovely Thornton Burgess Society that's in East Sandwich, Massachusetts, on the eastern seaboard of the Atlantic Ocean. So I recognize that everyone today is from the United States, but some of you are tuning in from all the way on the other side, on the Pacific side, so welcome. I'm sorry if it's really early for you. It's a little bit later of a morning for me. I just want to say that the place that I'm at, the Thornton Burgess Society, they're a nonprofit educational organization that was founded in 1976, and they're here in East Sandwich where there are a lot of stranding issues. The place that I'm at, they've so graciously invited me to be here for the day, is a nature center, and also it's the Greenbrier Jam Kitchen. The reason why I chose to be here today is because the classes and programs that they implement are planned around the philosophy of the late Thornton Burgess, who himself was a pioneer in conservation. He loved animals and biodiversity. He's quite famous, and he wrote about nature and animals for over 50 years. Has anyone ever heard of Peter Rabbit? That book was translated into, I think, about 100 languages. So if you have ever seen that, look up some of the Thornton Burgess books. He's very famous, and so I'm honored to be here today. I know that I have a limited screen, but I'm in the library. There's a beautiful window, and I can see the nice flower garden. I've got lots of books here about nature, and I have a little billboard behind me that says about the society, but I know you can't see it all, so I'll try to do my best to explain what I'm doing. So anyway, on with the show. The reason why I'm presenting to you today is because I was asked by Elgin High School to talk about marine mammals. See, I'm a marine mammal biologist, and I'm a conservation advocate, and I specialize in wildlife emergency management. What that means is that my research is about the risks to animals that live in the ocean, and what I'm trying to study and learn about and to teach about is to help them survive better while we humans live happily beside them. So that means I spend a lot of time reading about animals in the ocean, and I talk to other people who study animals in the ocean, and I spend a lot of time on different boats, mostly in the Cape Cod area, but also other areas as well. And I observe and record what's happening with the marine environment and all the animals in it. What I happen to like most are the marine mammals, but all of them are really important. Marine animals live in every ocean in the world, and they represent a variety of roles in the ocean. Every animal has a job in its environment. Can some of you think of some of the roles that they might play? Let's see if I have any responses. Some of the things that I would think of are maybe the top predators. Has anyone heard about sharks and how they like to eat big animals? Anyone watch Shark Week? How about filter feeders? Has anyone heard of baleen before? Baleen from a whale? I have a sample here. Anyone ever seen this before? From a whale? How about herbivores? We know that herbivores only eat plants, right? And you know, some of the animals are so important that live in the ocean. Even the poop that comes out of them puts nutrients into the environment. So all animals in the ocean have just as big of a role as you and I do, going to our job every day or going to school. So no matter what animals do in the ocean, they're important to a balanced environment, and they're important to biodiversity, which is why we're here today, and to people also. So we work really hard to help them when they get into trouble. So let's take a look at some of the animals that I've been studying. Can everybody see the map? Just give me a couple yeses so I can know that you did. Okay. So this is Cape Cod. This is where I live. I actually live in Plymouth, which is just after the skinny little canal that connects the body of water on top of Cape Cod and beneath it. Can you guys see that skinny little canal? It looks like a little string. Do you see all the blue? This land is surrounded by water. It's almost entirely like an island, except it's not. It's really a peninsula. It's attached to the rest of the state of Massachusetts at just one part. What shape of the land does the land look like to you? I have something that I like to think of it as. What do you think it is? I like to think of it as a certain shape. Anyone have any ideas? Looks a little like a shoe. And arm muscle. I like that one. To me, it looks like someone trying to flex their muscle. And so that's what I always do when someone who's on a boat that I'm talking to, or that I'm trying to describe what Cape Cod looks like. I try to just go like this, and I say the canal is here, and the tip of Cape Cod is up here, and inside here is Cape Cod Bay. I might consider it a wave or a ski as well. So that's Cape Cod. Cape Cod sticks out into the Atlantic Ocean, which you probably all have a sense of what the map of the United States looks like. On the eastern seaboard portion, we have the Atlantic Ocean, and on the western portion, we have the Pacific Ocean. And this water is very blue and deep and cool up here because I'm in the northern part of the United States. And there's two big bodies of water that are smaller than the Atlantic Ocean that Cape Cod area is within. So if you look inside the flexing muscle guy, that would be Cape Cod Bay. And underneath it is Nantucket Sound. So what you're seeing is a very detailed GPS map, I guess, of Cape Cod. And that will give you a sense of what the topography or the shape of the land is like. And that's going to be really important to our discussion. Okay? Remember, if you have any questions, feel free to throw them out there. Now, the purpose of our webinar today is to discuss marine mammals and how they can sometimes strand on the beaches of Cape Cod. So let's take a look at this picture. This is often what it looks like when we're on the water. Maybe the light is kind of funny, or there's a lot of shadows. This is a boat called Sea Salt Charters. I worked on it last summer with Captain Chad Avalar to bring people on whale watches, and we saw an amazing amount of beautiful whales that live in our water here. What do you see in the water? How many animals do you think are in there? Anyone take a guess? Do you think they're sharks or do you think they're dolphins? Do you see that many sharks together? Maybe 8. I, at the time of taking the picture, counted maybe about 10, maybe 12. These are dolphins. These are called common dolphins, and they love to come to Cape Cod because there's great food here. And what you see in the water might only be 20 or 30 or 40% of what there really is because they're underwater and they only need to come out for a little while to breathe, right? So they spend most of their time almost completely submerged. That means, underneath the waves. So you might not see a whole lot of them except for just small parts. So this is the idea to just get you used to what it looks like to see one of these in the wild, because you're probably not going to see them most likely in their full form, which is like this, right? So my question to you before we get really involved in talking about strandings is, what makes a marine mammal special? Do you know what the characteristics of a mammal are? I mean, I'm a mammal. I'm human. A dog is a mammal. What kind of characteristics would you think of? Name a few if you know them. There are 5 really big ones. What do we do that a fish doesn't? Anyone? Give me your thoughts. They do. They have hair or fur. That is a really big one. Now, there's a difference between the animals that live on land and the animals that live in the ocean. At some point in your life, you have to have hair if you're characterized as a mammal. But a lot of times, when you live in the water, you don't have any, or you don't look like you have any. Sometimes it's just when you're in the womb or right when you're born. And we'll get into that a little bit later. Another one somebody mentioned is live birth. They do give live birth. I've never heard of a whale or a dolphin or a seal that lays an egg before, and that's similar to humans. So that's another way that they're a mammal. What else? Let's see. What else do you have? Okay, they breathe air. That's a really good one. They have to breathe air because if they breathe water, they don't have any gills, so they're probably going to drown, right? They have to get their oxygen from their set of lungs, and all marine mammals have them just like us. Can anyone else think of another thing that might have to do with their blood? Think about turtles and snakes and other reptiles like that. What's their blood like in comparison to a mammal? Warm-blooded, correct. I hope that's the students coming up with those. Yes, they are warm-blooded. They have to be able to thermoregulate and keep their temperature, but they can do so by the energy that they take in, the food that they take in. And their warm blood keeps them really happy and comfortable in the water, just like our warm blood keeps us happy and comfortable on land. There's one more. It has to do with milk. Anyone have any ideas about what milk would have to do with a marine mammal? Correct. Bill G says mammary glands. Well, all young that are mammals have to drink milk at first. They can't go right to making themselves a sandwich or pulling something out of the refrigerator, right? So the moms who give live birth to the babies, this is humans, this is opossums, this is mice, this is giraffes, this is whales and dolphins and seals, they all have to feed their babies with their own milk for a little while before they can be weaned and become able to feed for themselves. So those are the 5 characteristics. I'll just go over them one more time. We said they're warm-blooded, and at some point in their life, they have hair, that's 2. They nurse their young with milk, that's 3. They give live birth instead of eggs, right? And they breathe air. So you have the 5 things there. So the difference between mammals on land and the mammals that are in the ocean, what makes them so special? What makes a marine mammal special? Do you think they have exactly the same characteristics? Think about, let me show you again. Just think about the shape of this animal. This is a dolphin, right? How is this dolphin different than something on land? I mean, think about it. It doesn't have a way to get out of the water. It has to live in the water, just like a whale, right? So it doesn't have legs. How does it attract a mate? How does it maintain its body temperature? Well, the thing about marine mammals is that they're really different. Over the last 100 and maybe, I would say the last 55 million years, I'll say, they've developed a lot of aquatic adaptations. And adaptation is something that helps them to be able to thrive really well in their environment and be successful with their life. So think about a dog or a giraffe or a person, something that we talked about before, and how the shape of the body of a marine mammal is very different. They're more streamlined and smooth, kind of like the shape of a torpedo. Another really interesting one is when it comes to the food and how they obtain it, marine mammals have different ways of getting it. They don't sit at the dinner table or, like I said, ask their mom to make them a sandwich. They have to find a way to go and get it. So they have structures like baleen or interesting teeth to do that. And also, someone's mentioning that the animals hold their breath for a really long time. That's true. They have to do that. And it's an interesting adaptation that they can. It's really hard to be in the water, if you've ever taken swimming lessons before, and you have to get your head out of the water to breathe. Because your mouth is here, you have to make sure you can get a bigger portion of your body out of the water in order to take in a good breath without swallowing water, right? Well, the whales and dolphins, they have special nostrils. They're called blowholes or nares, and they're not in front of the face like for you or me. So this would be, if I was a whale or dolphin, this would be my nares, my nostrils. What they do is they're moved to the top of the head. So when I show you some pictures of dolphins a little bit more closely, you'll see that the blowhole is on the top of the head, and that means that the whale or dolphin only has to come out of the water just a little bit to take a breath. So that's a really interesting adaptation. Let's move on, and I'll tell you about some of the types of whales that we see that strand and some of the types of dolphins and seals. So the dolphins that we see on Cape Cod that are common to strand are pictured here. We classify them as cetaceans. The word cetus means whale. And the important things to know about them is that they spend their whole lives in the ocean. They can't climb out and take a vacation. They include whales and dolphins and porpoises. On Cape Cod, we're lucky enough to see whales of all kinds during different seasons. We can see them from boats on the water, but sometimes we're even lucky enough to see them from land on beaches and in harbors. These pictures were taken in a boat, so you can tell that they're really close in the water. In the whole world, there's about 70 species of toothed whales. That's like individual types of animals that there are. And there's about 13 species of the baleen whales. The toothed whales are the ones that have, I'll show you. This is a little stinky, so I keep it in a box, that have teeth. Can you guys see the teeth? This is an older skull. But can you tell by the shape, this long nose here called a rostrum, that is the skull of a dolphin. And you can see the teeth that are sticking out of it. There are about 70 kinds of whales and dolphins and porpoises in the world that have teeth like this. And they can grab one fish at a time. That's how they eat. The baleen whales, there's fewer of those. They're much larger. Some of you may have heard of the blue whale or the humpback whale, or perhaps the right whale, which I'll be talking about later today. And those whales feed differently. They're filter feeders, and they really don't strand on Cape Cod, so we're not really going to talk about them here today. But the ones that you see from left to right in these pictures are the Atlantic white-sided dolphin, the long-finned pilot whale, and on the bottom right-hand corner with the baby sticking out is a Risso's dolphin. That picture on the lower right-hand side is of a calf. A baby dolphin or whale is known as a calf, kind of like a cow. Sometimes we call the moms and the babies together when we see them in the water a cow-calf pair. So let's think about some of the characteristics of an animal like this in comparison with another mammal that lives on land. They have a tapered body, looks a lot like a torpedo. They have no external hind limbs. That means there's no legs sticking out. And they have a tail. Remember, we talked about that a little bit. A tail that ends in a horizontal blade here with two lobes. This is one lobe. This is another. Okay? That is called a fluke. And then, of course, they have on top of their head a blowhole. You'll be able to see that a little bit closer in some of the other photos. Okay. I'm going to put this skull away because it's so smelly, I can't even stand it. So the next thing that we're looking at is classified as pinnipeds. Those are our seals that we see on Cape Cod. Pinnipedia, has everyone ever heard of the word ped before? Ped meaning foot. So Pinnipedia means fin-footed, and that's really cool to see. I'll show you a larger thing here. This is a model of a seal. It's hard to find ones that are small enough to show you in your picture, but they look a little bit like a dog. They do have whiskers, okay? So that's hair. And then they have smooth hair on their bodies and really cute little eyes that make them look like a dog, right? Someone mentioned we put our feet on a pedal on our bicycles. That's a great way to remember that ped means foot. It is. For the seals, their feet look very different. Usually they look like they're a tail smushed together, and you can see in this picture of a little harbor seal that is looking like a little banana on the beach here resting, that it's sticking those fins in the air together so it looks like a tail. But they can actually separate those, and each one is in itself a foot with little claws on the end. So they're really cute to see. So why are they different? Why are they different than the dolphins and the whales? They use their flippers for movement on land and water. So although they're kind of blubbery and awkward and don't really have a nice model walk to them, they can wiggle around and come out of the water. They're not supposed to do it all of the time, but they can do that for a little bit of time each day. That's called hauling out. And I don't know how well you can see the smaller picture that's on top of the seal here, but there's a picture that I took from Ellisville Beach, that's in Plymouth, and there's a rock that's a little ways out into the water, and there's two big blubbery fat seals sitting right on that, and that's called hauling out. They are sitting there and getting some air and drying out and relaxing. Can you guys see that? Can you see the two seals? Can I get a couple of yeses if you can? It's hard to see. The picture was kind of far away. The seals that we have on Cape Cod, they're known as true seals. They pull themselves over the land on their stomach. They can't get too very far. They swim with their hind flippers, and if you've ever seen something like a sea lion on the west coast, you'll know that they have ear flaps. Well, our seals on this side of the coast, they have no external ear flaps, so they just have a little tiny hole where their ear is. And so those are the kind of animals that we're looking at today. Now that we've gotten to the cute stuff, let's think about some of the sadder stuff for a minute. The reason why I came to talk to you today is that marine mammals strand on Cape Cod. And I'm not saying that this is an everyday occurrence, that it happens all the time, but it's something that happens and we often don't know why. We have many schools of thought on it, many different ideas of why it might happen. And I'm going to present some of those reasons to you today, but first I want to show you what stranding means. According to the National Marine Fisheries Service, the word stranding is defining an animal that is a dead marine mammal on shore, or any live dolphin or whale or seal that's cast ashore or unable to return to its natural habitat, or any live seal that cannot leave shore due to an injury or poor health, like say if it injured its flipper or if it has a really bad virus and it's too sick to be able to get back in the water. So what you see here is a picture of two dolphins being rescued. A single stranding occurs when just one dolphin or whale or porpoise or seal comes ashore by itself, alive or dead, and is in need of some help. A mass stranding is an event where two or more come ashore in the same geographic region. They don't have to be right next to each other, like they're sitting on a bus together, but it could just be along the same stretch of beach or in the same general area. As long as they're stranding near each other, it's considered one stranding. Seals and baleen whales, as I mentioned before, they don't mass strand. Only toothed whales do this. Remember the stinky skull? Like dolphins and porpoises. That's why I only showed you photos of the toothed whales in the last slide, and not the big, huge, beautiful ones like the blue whales or the humpback whales. Mass strandings can sometimes involve larger number of animals, sometimes over 100 individuals at a time. On Cape Cod, we have frequent strandings. Oftentimes they're single, and on occasion we do get mass strandings, which I'll show you a few pictures of. But we average about 226 stranded animals per year. Those numbers are given to me by International Fund for Animal Welfare, who has a rescue team that goes out and counts these animals each year. This makes Cape Cod one of the biggest stranding hotspots in the entire world. And so that's why we use this area to really learn more about this problem so we can do something about it. The numbers that I have from IFAW also, they gave me some stats, and some of them are here. There are 4 types of seals that strand on Cape Cod and 15 types of whales and dolphins that have stranded here in the past 20 years. It's been happening for hundreds of years. So my question to you is, do you think that it's because of human interaction, or do you think it's because of natural causes, or both? And I want you to think about why that might happen, why an animal might come ashore when it belongs in the ocean. Even some of the streets on Cape Cod, even some of the neighborhoods, little bodies of water, they're named after creatures that have stranded because the areas are so historically famous for it. It's been happening for hundreds of years, and even now, skeletons are turning up that are uncovered by the waves and the wind that show that there were lots of skeletons in certain locations here even hundreds of years ago. So that's important to think about. Now let's get over to the important reasons why there might be a single stranding. This is usually pretty easy to tell. These are photos that I took responding to different situations where there was a response that needed to be made. Somebody called in that there was an animal that needed help. Obviously, the one on the top did not need help. That's a skeleton. Not really much we can do for that one. Some of the reasons might have to do with the fact that they could get in trouble with people. That's called anthropogenic impact. More specifically, we can look at the fact that lots of people have boats in the water. They throw trash in it. They make noise in it. They do other things that upset the balance of the ocean. And IFAW says that over the last 10 years, about 7% of the marine mammals that strand in our response region, that's Cape Cod, suffered from some form of human interaction. So tell me what types of interaction you might see a human make with an animal like a seal. Think about what that might be. Give me some ideas, even if it's unintentional. And sometimes it is unintentional. Do you have any ideas? Give me some thoughts. Here are some of the ones that I've heard before. Harassment. Do you see that picture in the bottom? There's a little seal, and actually it's the same seal from my cover page, of a little harbor seal that's on a beach with a bunch of people. Those people are not bothering the seal, but they are still too close. If they got closer or made a lot of noise or threw trash at it or tried to feed it or touch it or do anything, whether they were being nice or not, it's still against the law, and it's still something that's considered harassment, and it can make the animal change its behavior. So that's a form of interaction. Gunshots. It can happen. Sometimes people who are hunters might use an animal for target practice, right? There's also other issues. When you have fishing gear in the water, it can be unintentional, but sometimes animals get tangled in the fishing gear, and so that's another concern. You can accidentally catch something when fishing, and that has certainly happened too. I've seen it happen with sea turtles. They grab something yummy on a line and don't realize that it's attached to a hook, right? Oil spills. All of these things are really good ideas. These are all things that are a form of human interaction. One thing that is a big concern with the larger animals, I'll be talking about in a later webinar, are vessel strikes. And those can sometimes hit the animals, of course, unintentionally. Nobody tries to hit a whale. And we'll be talking about that a bit more, but that's another reason why they might come ashore. Those are all anthropogenic impacts, meaning they're caused by humans, whether intentional or not. But there are other reasons. They might be natural. For example, disorientation. Maybe there's an issue like really bad weather, and an animal gets confused and comes ashore, and then they're just too tired to go back in. Or perhaps they get injured themselves. Maybe another animal attacks them and they get a bite taken out of them. Or maybe they're just inexperienced because they're really little and mom said, okay, now it's time for you to go and be a seal now, and I'm not going to take care of you anymore, and they're just not ready. So let's look at some of the reasons for mass stranding. Now this is a cartoon that I took from a guy named Dave Granlund. He's a really famous comic writer, and he put this up recently because we've been having a little bit of shark trouble on Cape Cod. Scientists and researchers, they believe that threats by predators such as sharks and the orca whale, which is also known as the killer whale, may cause marine mammals to swim closer to shore, where they are at increased risk of stranding. That is definitely true because we have a lot of Cape Codders as a result of hearing about or seeing sharks in the water that they swim a little closer to shore too, or just don't even go in the water at all. We've had a few sharks become a bit more interested in Cape Cod lately because our seal population is going up, which means free lunch for sharks. Has anyone ever seen a shark before? Let me hear a few shout outs. Anyone? They're a lot harder to see than the whales. Anybody seen sharks before? They're really, really cool and not nearly as scary as you might think. But they do like to eat their lunch. I love sharks too. All right, let's move on. So that's one reason for mass stranding. And I'm not saying, again, these are things that aren't necessarily happening all the time, and we can't necessarily prove that that's what's happening. But these are some of the thoughts as to the reasons why we might see mass stranding. Another reason for mass stranding is bad weather. As you can see, this picture from the Cape Cod Times shows, it's from our newspaper, the Cape Cod Times, was during a storm here in Sandwich, Mass, really close to where I am now. High winds and stormy seas can cause a storm surge that brings the water, big, huge waves, closer to the shore. And that allows animals to go farther inshore when they don't really mean to. Have you ever been to the beach and a big wave comes and it pushes you right back onto the beach? Kind of feels like that. And so animals can be more likely to be stuck when the tide recedes or pulls back away from the beach. It's thought that these conditions can increase the likelihood that animals become disoriented too. So maybe they get a little bit confused and get pushed a little too far, and that makes it a little bit tougher for them. So there's another way that animals can become stranded. Some of our larger toothed whales, for example, the pilot whale, and I'll give you a sense of what they look like. Does everybody know what a vertebra is? Have you seen a backbone before? In most mammals, they look pretty similar in shape. Well, your vertebra might be about this big. The vertebra of a pilot whale is this big. Can everybody see that? It's a little hard to see. These are the spines that stick out, and this is where the spinal cord goes. You can see this. Now, this is actually comparatively small to some of our larger whales, which you probably couldn't even pick up. Some of the ones from maybe a fin whale or a humpback whale, they can maybe weigh 50 pounds. This weighs just about 2 pounds, so it's pretty small. But some of these animals can be 14 to 20 feet long. And so that's what you're seeing in the picture here. You're seeing pilot whales who have stranded, and they're actually still submerged in the water, but the water is so shallow that they really can't get out. So the species that typically mass strand are often offshore animals that stick together in tight social groups. They have very strong bonds. They love to be all about family. So why does it seem to be a good idea to stick together in the wild? You tell me. Tell me. Did anyone ever see Finding Nemo? Do you remember the silverfish that clumped together? Tell me why you think it's a good idea to stick together in the wild, whether you're big or small. What do you think? Well, I'll tell you. Because if you're a little guy, or even a big guy, and there's just one of you, you can stay out of trouble a little bit easier if you're in a group, right? Whoever wants to walk home alone in the dark? Never, no one. There's safety in numbers. They watch out for each other. Animals evade predators and hunt much more effectively in a group. In fact, the orca whales, the black and white whales, you've seen them before on TV, killer whales, they actually hunt in packs to the point where they're known as the wolves of the sea. They hunt in packs together so that they can easily get their food and do it with less energy. So the problem with this, it's a really great thing when you're trying to survive, but when you're close to shore, those same social bonds lead to trouble when one individual ventures into a coastal area where it's tidally influenced. That means the tide goes in and out. Whether it's a dominant animal that is kind of a leader, or a sick individual, or a really young animal that just doesn't know what it's doing, the whole group can follow, and that's a problem. Ever heard of the old adage, Well, if you jump off of a bridge, I will too. Or should I jump off of a bridge just because you're doing it? Well, if they were pilot whales, they probably would. There's gonna be a mass stranding if the tide falls back and all these animals get confused for some reason and come too close into shore. If just one animal becomes sick or injured or disoriented, the entire group can strand instead of just one affected whale or dolphin. So that's a big problem. And so leading into that, the extreme tide that we have on Cape Cod is absolutely beautiful. Where I'm standing on a sidewalk, I can see probably 2 miles out of all the water that's receded at low tide. This is a great place to go clamming. This is in Dennis, Chapin Beach at low tide. Look how far the sand goes away from where I was standing. Can you see how shallow that would be for a really long time, even when the water comes in at the changing of the tide, when the tide comes back? Mass strandings will often coincide with full and new moon tidal cycles. That means that we're going to have an extreme high water and an extreme low water, so that the animals, if they swim farther inshore than usual, they can be beached when the tide turns. So, as I said before, the species that can commonly strand are offshore animals. The larger word for that you might want to use as a glossary word later is called pelagic. An offshore animal is pelagic. They spend more time way out to sea. In the Cape Cod region, as I pointed out in earlier pictures, that might mean common dolphins, pilot whales, the Risso's dolphin, remember that cute baby in the beginning, and the Atlantic white-sided dolphins. Since these animals spend most of their time in deep waters in the open ocean, they're not accustomed to the tidal fluctuations or the tidal flux. One area that if you go back and look at the map of Cape Cod, you'll see a little tiny hook inside the big hook of Cape Cod. Wellfleet Harbor can fluctuate up to 12 vertical feet. That's high tide to low tide during a full moon cycle. And as a result, when animals go into nearshore waters, they might be caught high and dry, and that can be really scary. So here's another reason why animals might mass strand. I got this picture, which of course most whales don't wear earmuffs, but this one apparently did. I got this from oceancare.org, and they really care a lot about acoustic disturbance, which is a noisy ocean that creates problems with the animals. Many of the whales and dolphins, especially the toothed whales, they rely on sound for everything, from communication to navigation to hunting. When loud noises or underwater acoustic disturbance interrupt the whale's use of sound, it can make harmful problems, like they get disoriented or confused. Did you ever go to a concert or listen to music and it just hurts your head and bothers you? It makes you not be able to think. Or, you know, if your mom or dad's driving the car and they say, "Be quiet, I have to think," and they turn down the radio, acoustic disturbance can create a lot of disorientation. And in the water, that might be caused by naval sonar or powerful air cannons that are used in ocean exploration or testing of some kind. If you can't hear very well, it's easy to get confused, and sometimes that means that you're going to get stuck. Can you think of a time that's ever happened to you? I know it has for me. If I drive in an area I don't know and the radio's on, sometimes I get lost and I just have to pull over. So another reason for mass stranding is features of land. The big word for this is called topography. As I said, many animals come inshore at different times of year, and they become disoriented from the complex problems that we see. We've already discussed weather and tidal flux, things like that. Well, that hook of land that I was talking about, that can be a problem too. That's a feature of land. We have all kinds of complex inlets and hook-like shapes of areas in Cape Cod. And those are really beautiful spots that when the tide goes down, we can see the sand and go exploring for shells and crabs and sea worms and all kinds of cool things. But the problem with that to animals that live in the water is it can look like a maze, and they have a hard time finding their way out of it. Wellfleet Bay, as I said before, the little hook inside the big hook of Cape Cod, is an added feature to the land that is likely the reason that more than 60% of all of the mass strandings in this area that we have recorded have taken place in that area. That's more than half of the strandings we've seen on Cape Cod. Another thing that we notice about the locations of stranding areas, this is again a feature of the land, is that what's on the bottom of the water is similar. We tend to have gently sloping, sandy, or muddy, flat areas, and that's an area that has a history of stranded animals a lot, and that might lessen the animal's ability to navigate around or find their way around. So that's another reason. So now that we've talked about some of those, let me show you a couple examples of recent mass strandings, and by recent, in the last 10, 20 years. A stranding is a big event around Cape Cod, and that's not the only place that it happens. We have a few examples. Cape Cod, South Norway, Tasmania, all over the places, all over the world. Do you think, you tell me, if you see an animal come out of the water, is it okay to just push the animal back in the water? Do you think that that's a good way to help? Give me your advice on that. Look at how big those animals are. Tell me why you think that's not a good idea. Why do you think you might need a trained professional for that? Well, let's talk about it. Pushing a stranded dolphin or whale back in the water can be a very dangerous endeavor, not only for the whale, but also for the person. Look at how big they are and how powerful they are, even if they're weak, even if they haven't eaten in a while. You could certainly cause an injury. So whales and dolphins, they have extremely powerful tails, and if they're a seal, well, they have extremely powerful teeth. Here's just the canine tooth of one seal. This is on a seal skull. Can you guys see that? If they need help and they're sick, do you really want to be bitten by something that's sick, or slapped in the face, or thrown across the beach by something like that? Absolutely not. So dragging porpoises or whales or seals or dolphins back into the water and just saying, oh, no problem, they'll swim away, that can cause irreversible damage to the animal. And of course, it compromises your safety. In order for animals like this to obtain the best care possible, they need to be examined by a marine mammal biologist, someone who's more trained than me, and veterinarians that handle this stuff professionally and with specialized equipment. Additionally, years of experience have determined that the whales and dolphins here on Cape Cod and in other places as well, if they're pushed off, they usually immediately restrand because they're sick and they need help. And if they get pushed off again to be put back in the water without the help, they're not a good candidate for help, and they usually won't survive. So it's really important to remember not to do that. These are some of the ways we know this. We want to know what we can do to help these animals. Well, we've done a lot of research. Why? Because once the marine wildlife is gone, they're gone forever. So what do? I'm here to talk to you about biodiversity today. Well, whales and dolphins and seals, they make the world more biodiverse, and they help it a lot. Things that are done to reduce strandings and to save marine wildlife, there are many things. We have whole programs in the government that issue regulations and permits and authorizations, like the Marine Mammal Protection Act or the Endangered Species Act. Has everyone heard of the Endangered Species Act before? That's something that helps to conserve our wildlife. There are international laws. There are treaties. I'm sure you learn about this in history or social studies class. But aside from the government, there are marine mammal stranding programs. To help the mission, we're very lucky on Cape Cod to have a network of organizations and really smart scientists who work hard to ensure the safety of our marine life. Some of them include organizations like the New England Aquarium in Boston, International Fund for Animal Welfare, or IFAW, in Yarmouth Port, I already mentioned them, Whale and Dolphin Conservation in Plymouth, who provided this graphic, the National Marine Life Center, or NMLC, in Buzzards Bay, and the Center for Coastal Studies on the very tip of Cape Cod in Provincetown. Their work includes things like this, what you see here, a debris study. How does the trash affect the animals? Here you see the orange balloons, those are where trash was. The blue dots, those are where whales were seen. Geographical studies, where do the animals go and at what time of year? Behavioral studies, how can we help the whales or dolphins or seals avoid danger? What do they do in the environment? And even population health studies, that's all the animals together. How are the animals doing as a whole? So there are also marine rescues that occur from the water or the beach. This is an image from Cape Cod, the Provincetown Center for Coastal Studies. You can see in the bottom left-hand corner, there's a permit number because not anyone can just go out there. They have to be issued a permit from the government to be allowed to do this kind of work. Marine animal entanglement rescue teams, like the one from the Center for Coastal Studies, have first responders and specialized people who are trained. They have a big job on Cape Cod. They have people who report what they see, animals in trouble, and that might include a citizen scientist like yourself that maybe calls in because you see something from the beach. They report animals and they give a detailed description of the location of what they see, the landmarks on the beach to help find the animal, and then they can provide the number of the live or dead animals they saw. So what happens is the staff and a specialized team, they answer the hotline and they receive more information about the status of the animal, maybe about the weather, about how accessible the site is, because if it's on the beach and there's a 1 mile muddy hike, that's going to be tough to get to the spot, right? There's lots of ways they can get to them, by boat or by car. The conditions are really important to consider, and they have to know how to dispatch the most appropriate response, just like when you call the ambulance if somebody has a heart attack. That way they can respond more easily. So another thing that we have on Cape Cod is a stranding prevention program. This was another photo, I'm sorry that it's grainy, I had to enlarge it, from the Cape Cod Times. IFAW, as I mentioned before, they developed a mass stranding program to avert strandings before they even happen. It's the only successful program in the world to help prevent dolphins and whales from stranding. Basically what they do is they respond as quickly as possible when they hear of something happening, and they use small boats and a little special acoustic device called a pinger that irritates the dolphin or a whale's ears by emitting an irritating high frequency noise, like a dog whistle. That's kind of what it sounds like. And in doing that, they can herd the animals back out to sea before they come into a spot where they're really going to get in trouble. On top of that, they have special propeller guards on the blades of their propellers so that further ensures the safety of the animals if they have to take the boat near them. The IFAW boats will sweep behind the group of animals. It's kind of like in a half circle or half moon pattern, and that encourages them to swim in the proper direction, away from land. Another thing that we have here in Cape Cod, and there are other places like this, you can go on Facebook and look, there's all kinds of rehabilitation centers. There are some special places that can accommodate a smaller marine mammal that gets sick. Here on Cape Cod, we have the Buzzards Bay one. It's called the National Marine Life Center, NMLC. There's a facility to rehabilitate seals and also turtles, which I'm not talking about today, but they really are cute. And you can find a lot of stories on them as well. What happens is that the animals, when they come in, they get a health assessment done, like a doctor checkup. You've all had that, right? You've had shots and antibiotics. Tell me what that's like. Is it fun? It's a little bit scary, right? When they're confident that the animals are no longer sick, they arrange to release them back in the wild. Sometimes they're tagged. They can be tracked, maybe with a little cow tag that's attached to a flipper or with a satellite tag. It's extremely expensive and the science is still limited, but we're learning a lot by the animals that we are able to re-release into the ocean and find out where they go and how well they're doing. So the problem is if the animals are really large, like a pilot whale, we can't do this. This picture shows National Marine Life Center sending off a seal back onto Scusset Beach in Sandwich. And so this really helps us to be able to give each animal success if we can, but it also tells us a lot about all of the different organisms that go out. IFAW has been tremendously successful in relocating and releasing mass stranded dolphins, and you will see them if you're ever out on the beach and something's happening. They'll load them into trucks and trailers that transport them across land as fast as possible, and then they release them in deep water beaches. All the feedbacks from things like satellite tags indicates that these dolphins, when they're released, are swimming and behaving like they're supposed to be. So there's that option too. The biggest thing that I always like to talk about is public education. And I'm not going to bore you to death on it because I'm already telling you all about it here today. But programs, publications, signs, and festivals, learning about stranded animals, it's important for the public, for scientists, for lawmakers. It's important to you. And the reason why is because it serves science worldwide. It tells us about the existence of some marine mammals we might never know about. It tells us about individual illnesses and deaths, larger scale problems caused by disease or toxins like oil spills, environmental disturbances, all kinds of things. It serves conservation, and it helps us to create special rules about how to handle the environment, making sure that the animals stay healthy. And learning about each event helps us get even better at the job of doing it every single time. When you first rode a bike, was it fun? Was it easy? No, probably not. When you first learned to tie your shoelaces, could you do it really well? No, but with practice you get better. And it got easier, right? So that's the same thing that happens here. It's also a safety issue. Some of you mentioned that you can get injured by an animal if you go near it on the beach. They can be really dangerous to humans. And because they also carry illnesses and bugs that we don't know about, they can be dangerous to our health and make us sick. And so doing this work really helps us. These are some pictures from one of my favorite organizations, the Whale and Dolphin Conservation. We're celebrating the right whale. And on the one on the bottom, the top one is a cake with a right whale on it. The bottom one is at a festival that gets people interested in learning a little bit more about the whales and dolphins. And the thing on the right is a poster from a very recent wildlife festival that we had here on Cape Cod, and we talked all about whales. Wasn't the only wildlife there. Someone's asking if you would get sick if you touched a dolphin with your bare hands, or if you would get a dolphin sick, I'm sorry, if you touched it with your bare hands. That's really, really hard to say. There are many different bacterias and viruses and organisms that we can pass along back and forth to each other. That's a topic that would be covered probably in a whole other day. But yes, it is possible to get sick or to give something to an animal, and that's why you should never touch them without proper protection. So what I want to end on, before I lose you all today, is how you can help. Well, you took the first step by attending the webinar, but there's all sorts of things to do, and I've listed some of them here. Take what you learned today and ask yourself some questions. Maybe find out some more. Social media can be fun for friends, but it's also great for learning about subjects you care about that are happening all over the world. This is one for me. I get online. Talk to your friends about the issue and see what they think. It's great to support organizations that do a good job helping the cause. Some of them I've mentioned, and I've displayed their logos here. That might mean adopting a whale in a classroom, or visiting an aquarium that has scientists that do great work, or perhaps participating in a beach cleanup. But you don't have to live near a beach to help with these things. You can have social responsibility in the environment. Pick up your trash, recycle, report animals in trouble, even if they're land animals, even if they're someone's pet, whatever you can do. But the most important thing that you can do is find out what you're most excited about that relates to biodiversity and be passionate about it through learning. If you work really hard to work on that and you help to make the world better, then you're making it more biodiverse as well, and that's going to serve us all. So with that, thank you for listening, everybody. Thanks for participating in my webinar. It's my first one, so I'm sorry if I yammered on too much. I also want to thank the students and teachers at Elgin High School that made it possible to reach such a wide audience about environmental topics that matter, like biodiversity and strandings. If you'd like to learn more, please visit any of these websites here. There are many others, but I only had space for a few. They do great work in Massachusetts and all over the world. And if you would like, my Twitter's on the bottom. It's specifically for Ocean Devotion. That's why it's called @OceanDevotion. Okay? So if you want to go on there and ask me a question, please feel free to do that. There's Facebook pages that are related to all of the organizations I discussed today. I want to thank Whale and Dolphin Conservation for supplying all of my specimens, my stinky specimens today that I showed you. And please do that if you're interested in this, because it's a really important matter whether you live near the ocean or not. Somebody's asking, how did I become interested in studying marine mammals? Well, I can tell you that. I grew up in Plymouth, Massachusetts. That's America's hometown. And I went on a whale watch when I was 5 years old. I took the Captain John boat out of Plymouth Harbor, which is about 3 miles from my house. And I saw a very beautiful whale named Owl. And she was a humpback whale. And she's actually still alive today. And you can find pictures of her all over the internet. She's named Owl because she has 2 spots on her flukes on the tail of her, one here and one here, and it looks like an owl staring at you. And she's a very successful mama. She's all over the ocean. We see her every year. I would say that my favorite marine mammal is definitely a humpback whale because I've spent so much time studying them. But I also love the really beautiful and tubby looking right whale. Dolphins are beautiful too, but everybody really likes dolphins, so I like to be a little bit different. I'm not sure I can actually say I have a real favorite, but they're all my favorite. Does that answer the question? Somebody is asking about how many different kinds of sharks there are. I'm not a shark expert at all. I know a little bit about them, and I know that around here we have the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy. If you've heard much on Shark Week or about the Shark app from OSearch, there's a lot of research happening here about that particular issue. I don't know how many kinds of sharks there are. I know that they're cartilaginous fishes and that they're not as scary as people seem to think they are. They're just trying to give everyone hugs. So sharks are not mammals. Sharks are actually a cartilaginous fish. They breathe through gills, not with lungs. And you can definitely find out more about them. I don't think anyone's doing a webinar on them, but maybe next year. Let's see, someone's asking about glaciers. Well, we have sea level rise as a result of global warming, right? And the seas are rising. With more high tides, will more sea animals strand? That's probably a topic for a whole other session. I can tell you, I did get recently graduated Maritime Academy in Bourne, Massachusetts, with a degree in emergency management. And one of the big things that we focused on in that group was to look at sea level rise and how that increases extreme weather. And the extreme weather has definitely been found to create more strandings and to cause more damage on things like beach, erosion or loss of homes or flood damage, things like that. So I think that, yes, I think that there's a potential that we could definitely see more animals strand. I can't say what kind of numbers or amount, but it sure is possible. And one more question here. Do animal organs ever get used for transplant? That's an interesting question. I can say for sure it's not something that is an issue with wild animals. To other marine mammals, no, I've never heard of that. It is possible that somebody's experimenting somewhere, but gosh, I sure hope not. Because any animal that strands obviously is doing so for a reason, and they're not feeling very well. So I wouldn't think that they would be using those for transplant. It has happened in things like dogs and cats. I can say that for sure because I've worked as a vet tech for about 7 years, but you're not going to see it much. It's difficult. So I think that's all the questions I'm going to take for now because my hour is up, guys. Thank you for listening to me talk. Again, I really want to thank the students and the teachers of Elgin High School for all of you out there who care about biodiversity and care about dolphins and seals. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I hope you all find a way to be inspired to learn a little bit more about this. Okay, so if you have questions, please feel free to pose them at my Twitter, OceanDevotion84, or contact any of my local favorites you see here, National Marine Life Center, International Fund for Animal Welfare, New England Aquarium, or the whales.org one is Whale and Dolphin Conservation. They'll all be happy to give you some information, and there's excellent stuff online and through people, so please do talk about stuff. Okay? Take care, everyone. Happy National Biodiversity Teach-In Week, and I will see you again. Bye-bye.